Okay, hello everybody. Today's daf is daf lamed daled, and today's daf is also going to be quite straightforward and on one topic, and uh, and not drawn out. So it sticks with one topic. Okay, so we're going to start from daf lamed gimel amud beis towards like the last third of the page. Rish Lakish, right? I have it on my screen over here. Rish Lakish Amar. Just to background what Rish Lakish is trying to do. This is going back to a question that we had. We're going back to over here on the bottom of the page of Daf. Let's see, that was Daf Lamed Aleph. Amid Beis, we had a question. The Gemara asked a contradiction. Our Mishnah says if you rape, okay, we're going to use the word ma'anis. If you ma'anis your sister, you have to pay your father 50 shkalim, okay? And then we asked a contradiction, but doesn't the Mishnah say that if you have relations with your sister, you get malchus? And we have a rule that if you're getting malchus, you don't pay. So how does our Mishnah say that you do pay? And that Mishnah says you get malchus. So we tried to resolve that question over the past day. And now comes along Rish Lakish and gives a simple answer. Rish Lakish Amar, Rish Lakish says, Hamani, who's our Mishnah, that says you paying money, but our Mishnah also agrees that you'll give the guy malchus. And actually, you're going to punish him twice. You're going to give him two punishments. Rav Meir holds that you don't, just because you get one punishment, you don't get off on the other punishment. The Amar, who said, Loike umashale, that you can give a guy malchus, and you could force him to pay the shkalim. So that's why our Mishnah is saying that that you give him, our Mishnah says you're paying 50 shkalim, but it doesn't even mention it, but you're certainly going to give him malchus for sleeping with his sister. So the Gemara asks the question, if our Mishnah in Masechta Kesubos is, according to Rav Meir, afilu bitoinami, even if you slept with your sister, with your daughter, the halacha should be that you should pay the money, because the Mishnah is going to say, not a little bit later, that if someone sleeps with his daughter, since he's going to get misa, because that's a death penalty by Bezdin, therefore you're not going to pay. So so if Rav Meir always holds that you can fine a person twice, you can punish him with two punishments. So why is it that when you sleep with your daughter, you don't pay the 50 shekel? Now, who would you pay the 50 shekel if it's your own daughter? That's another question. But why does the Mishnah say you putter from the 50 shekel when you sleep with your daughter later on? According to Rav Meir, you should get two punishments. The chitema, would you answer that? Rav Meir loikem mishalim islay. Rav Meir will hold that you can give him haretz and malchus and make him pay. Meis u'mishalim leslay. But to give him the death penalty and to make him pay, that Rav Meir doesn't agree to. So the Gemara asks a question, V'la, that's not true. V'ha Tanya, we learned in a brisa, Gonaf v'tovach. A guy steals an animal. Now the halacha is, remember your chumash, if you steal a shor or a seh, right? So let's say that means you shor of a seh, and you steal the animal, and then you slaughter the animals. So then sometimes you pay dalit four times, and sometimes you pay 5 times as much. Normally, if you steal, you have to pay back double, kefil. But if you stole something and he slaughtered it, then you pay 4 or 5 times the animal. And then 4 if you took a sheep, or if you took an ox, you pay 5. What the Gemara is saying is, the Mishnah says that if someone stole and slaughtered it on Shabbos, so when you slaughter on Shabbos, you chayav misa. Ganav v'tovach l'avodah zarah. He stole something and shechted it for avodah zarah. Ganav shor haniskel utvacha. He stole a shor haniskel, which we're going to discuss in a moment, and he shechted it. All these things you do pay. Mishalim tashlume abava chamishu di Rav Meir. Rav Meir says you will pay the 4 and the 5 penalty, in addition to getting the death penalty, right? Because you stole and you slaughtered it on Shabbos, and you're going to pay the 4 and the 5. The 4 or 5 times as much, and you're going to get the death penalty. So we do see Meisu Mishalim. Rav Meir would hold that you give the death penalty and you make him pay. So if our Mishnayos are going according to Rav Meir, then why is it that if someone is Ma'anes, his daughter, which he's going to get the death penalty, he is pater from paying? The Chachamim say if you slaughter and you stole the animal and slaughtered it on Shabbos, you're pater. So So therefore our Mishnah cannot go like Rab Meir. Answers the Gemara, yes. Our Mishnah goes like Rab Meir. And Rab Meir really holds when you get the death penalty, they're not going to fine you with the money, with paying the money. It's just lahavdil. We're coming off Tisha B'Av. The Yamach Shemam, the Germans, when they killed somebody in the early part of the war in Dachau, before the war started, they would send you the ashes and make you pay for the cremation. That was the Yamach Shemam did. So the Chachamim say, and nobody. So what the Gemara is saying over here, that no such a thing, even Rab Meir holds that you would not get the death penalty and pay. So why you there by slaughtering on Shabbos, you're going to pay? Presumably, you get the death penalty. So the Gemara says, all these answered over there, you're not getting the death penalty because you stole it, the guy stole it, but somebody else is doing the slaughtering. So if somebody else is doing the slaughtering, so therefore the Ganef hired somebody to do the slaughtering, so the slaughterer gets the Misa, but the Ganef has to pay the 4 and the 5. So the Ganef is not going to get the death penalty because he's not the slaughterer. He's not the Shoichet. But he's required to pay the 4 and the 5. So the Gemara says, just because somebody else did the slaughtering, the Ganef has to pay 4 and the 5. We have a din, Ein Shliach L'Dvar Aveira. You don't. A messenger can't be. If you tell somebody to do an Aveira, he's not your messenger. Here it's different. The Torah says when you slaughter or sell it, you have to pay 4 or 5. If you sell something, you usually have another person involved. So also by slaughtering, even if you use somebody else to do the slaughtering, the Ganef himself would have to pay the 4 and the 5. The Rebbe Shmuel Tana, Rebbe Shmuel says, how do you know that if you hire somebody to do the slaughtering for you, you have to pay the 4 and the 5? Because it says Tvachei Oy Machare. Oy, the extra word Oy, L'Rabbis is Shliach, that includes a Shliach, a messenger is included in that for the 4 and the 5. Bechizkiah Tani Tachas L'Rabbis is Shliach. Now Rabbi Chizkiah taught that the Tachas is Marba the Shliach. That if you have a shliach, you also pay the 4 and the 5. Okay, so hi Alan, we're just on the bottom of Lamed Gimel Lamed Beis. So basically, this is where we're at. Rab Shlokish just gave a teretz. Why does our Mishnah say that you pay? How come you don't get? How come you pay? You should get malchus and be potter from paying. So Rav Shlokish answered that our Mishnah goes according to Rabbi Meir, and Rabbi Meir holds loike u'mishalim. Period. Loike u'mishalim, you get both. So our Mishnah says you pay the knas for sleeping with your sister, and you get malchus. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, why does the next Mishnah say that if you slept with your daughter, you get the death penalty, and you don't have to pay? Why? Rab Meir holds that Rab Meir hold that you can find a person, give him 2 punishments. So Gemara says no. Rab Meir does not hold when you get the death penalty, you have to pay. The Mishnah said over there, the Brisa said that if you slaughter on Shabbos, Rab Meir says you pay dalet a hay. If you stole an animal and you slaughtered it on Shabbos, you pay dalet and hay. Rab Meir doesn't hold meis u'mishalim, that you get the death penalty and you pay. So the Gemara has just gone through saying that you slaughtered it through a shaliach, a messenger. You didn't slaughter it. That's why the Ganef is not chayav misa. Somebody else did the slaughtering, and you are going to have to pay. The Ganef is going to have to pay the 4 and the 5. So the Gemara asks the question. Maskiv lo mazitra. Mazitra asked the question. Miyikamidi. How could it be a possible situation? If he himself did the slaughtering, loy mechayev, then he wouldn't have to pay him the 4 and the 5. But if he hired somebody to do the slaughtering on his behalf and slaughtered it on Shabbos, mechayev, he would be chayev to pay 4 and the 5. So the Gemara says very simple. Ihu lav mishum d'lo mechayev. He's really not. If he slaughtered the animal himself on Shabbos, it's not that he's exempt. He's obviously has to get the death penalty and pay. Ela mishum, but there's a rule. The kam lei b'derabim malei. He gets the more severe punishment and he gets off on the lighter punishment. So he gets the severe punishment of the death penalty and he's exempt from paying the 4 and the 5. But And so that's why. But he's shechting through somebody else, when he shechts with somebody else, then he's not getting the death penalty. Therefore, he's mechayev to pay the 4 and the 5. So the Gemara asks a question. So now, but if you brought a brisa that said that if somebody shechts on Shabbos, Rameir holds you pay the 4 and the 5. Rabbanan say you're pater, and we're talking about somebody shecht. He didn't do the shechting. The Ganav didn't do the shechting. So then why would the Rabbanan say that the Ganav is pater? That's the Gemara's question. If somebody else did the shechting, my tamayu the Rabbanan the patri, why would the Rabbanan hold it? You're pater, you're exempt from paying. Somebody else is doing the shechita, you're the Ganav, you should be required to pay the 4 and the 5. And says the Gemara, Man Chachamim, we go to Daf Lamed Aleph, Reb Shimon, the author of our Mishnah, of that writes is Reb Shimon. And the Rabbanan is Reb Shimon, the Amar, who said that Shchita she'ein ruya lo shma shchita. If you shecht an animal that is not, and you cannot eat the animal, for example, you shechted it for avodah zarah, that's not called a shchita. And therefore, like let's say when you shecht an animal, you have to cover the blood with dirt. Since if you shecht an animal for avodah zarah, there's no mitzvah of covering the blood because that animal cannot be eaten. So the shechita doesn't produce an animal that you can eat. And therefore, that's why the Rabbanan say that when are you chayev daled v'hei is only if you shech the animal and it's a kosher shechita. But here it's not a kosher shechita because you're shechting for avodah zarah. One of the cases is that you shecht for avodah zarah. So the Gemara says, "Hatinish avodah zarah v'shar haniskal." When you shech for these two things, then you can't benefit from the animal. El shechita Shabbos, when you slaughter on Shabbos, shechita ruyi, it's a kosher shechita. How do you know if a guy on purpose shechts on Shabbos? It's a kosher shechita. That's now we learned in the Mishnah. Someone slaughters on Shabbos and on Yom Kippur in the privacy of his own home. We're not talking about like a guy who converted out of the religion. He's a Jewish guy, but on purpose for business he shechts on Shabbos. Even though he's doing something that he's liable to the death penalty, the shechita is kosher. So therefore, why would the Rabbanan say you're pater if the guy's shechting on Shabbos? Answers the Gemara, because there's an opinion that says if someone shechts on Shabbos, nobody can benefit from it. It's like becomes asur b'hana. Because Savala, Rabbi Yochanan and Sandler, this man, the Chachamim, Rav Mishnah holds like Rabbi Yochanan and Sandler. The time we learned in the Baraisa, Hamavashal b'Shabbos, someone let's say cooked a cholent on Shabbos, b'shoygeg yoichel, if he did it by mistake, he could eat it. B'mezed lo yoichel, b'mezed lo yoichel, he can't eat it. So if he did it by mistake, you could eat it if you did it on purpose, you can't eat it till Matzah Shabbos probably, but somebody else could eat it. Divrei Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says, "B'shoichek, if you did it by mistake, yoichel b'matzoi Shabbos. You're not allowed to eat it. You could only eat it Matzah Shabbos. On Shabbos, if you cooked on Shabbos by mistake, it's usher. You can't eat it until Matzah Shabbos. B'mezid, if you did it on purpose, lo yoichel alamis, you can eat it forever, but other people could eat it because you, the violator, have a knas, a punishment that you can't eat this food, but somebody else could eat this food." But here's the point. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Bishoygeg, if you do cook on by mistake on Shabbos, Shabbos you can eat it. You can only feed it to somebody else on Matzah Shabbos, not him. So you can never eat it, even if you cooked it by mistake. And b'mezid, if you cooked on Shabbos on purpose, you're never allowed to eat it, not to you, not to anybody. So according to Rabbi Yochanan ben Hasandler, which that's why the Rabbanan pater, because according to Rabbi Yochanan Hasandler, if you shecht on Shabbos, the animal is not kosher. Nobody can eat it. And therefore, you're not chayiv daled v'hei. Because when did the Torah say you chayiv daled v'hei? Only if you stole an animal and you slaughtered it and you made it kosher shechita. But if you did a non-kosher shechita, then there's no daled v'hei. And that's the reason why the Rabbanan pater, because they hold like Rabbi Yochanan Sandler. So the Gemara says, my time with Rabbi Yochanan Sandler. What's the reason of Rabbi Yochanan Sandler? Answers the Gemara, Kedidorish Rab Chia Piskun de Benasiya. Rab Chia gave this drasha on the door of the house of the Nasi. It says, the Shabbos ki kodesh hi lechem. The Torah says, keep the Shabbos because it's very holy. Ma kodesh, just like holy objects, also bachila, you're not allowed to eat them. because it's not yours. Af masa Shabbos asur mechila. If you do something on Shabbos and violated the Shabbos by cooking or slaughtering, it's asur bechila. So the Gemara says, "Ima kodesh asur ba'no, af masa Shabbos asur ba'no." Just like kodesh, you're not allowed to derive benefit something belonging to hegdish. So would you think that if you cooked on Shabbos, is it asur ba'no? You can't benefit. You can't give it to your maid or give it to a goy to eat. You have to bury it. In between, you can benefit from it, but you're not allowed to eat it. Yochel, I might have thought, even by mistake. That means that only if you did something on purpose, then the food becomes asur bahanoah, not if you do it by mistake. So it's one pasuk that teaches you this teaching that according to Rabbi Yochanan Sandler, a slaughtering on Shabbos is completely asur bahanoah, and therefore, according to Rabbanan, since you're not, it's not that in asur bahanoah, it's asur ba'achila. Hanoah, it's permitted, but it's asur to eat, so it's a non-kosher shechita. Therefore, the Rabbanan hold in that brisa that they argue, Rab Meir, they hold your potter from Daled Vehe. Now the Gemara just continues. Pligi da Rav Acha Ravina. Rav Acha and Ravina had an argument about even in Rabbi Yochanan Sandler's opinion. Chadamar, one said, Masa Shabbos Daraisa. An action that you do on Shabbos becomes asur, prohibited, min haTorah. Like if you slaughter on Shabbos, if you cook on Shabbos, you're not allowed to eat it, min haTorah. Chadamar D'Rabbanan. The one says, no, it's only Issa D'Rabbanan. Nobody says it becomes asur Daraisa. So Mandama Daraisa G'damran. The one that said that it's asur Daraisa, we just explained the reason, because the Torah says, Shabbos ki kodesh, that whatever you do on Shabbos, you can make something holy and make it asur to you. But the one that learned it's the Rabbanim, why does he disagree? Why does he disagree with that pasuk? Makra, he could give you a pasuk, kodesh he kodesh, vein masao kodesh. What the Torah is telling you, that only the Shabbos itself, the day itself is holy, but not the violation of Shabbos becomes holy. That does not become holy. And therefore, so of course, according to Rabbanan, according to this Rabbanan, that if you cook on Shabbos or you slaughter on Shabbos, it is kosher. Okay, so if that's kosher, then why would the Rabbanan that argue Rab Meir hold your potter from Dala to Hay? Again, you're not the one that's slaughtering it; somebody else is slaughtering it. So why should the Ganav? Why should the Ganav be potter from paying Dala to Hay? That's Gemara's next question. According to the opinion that says if you slaughter on Shabbos, it's only asur d'Rabbanan. But min haTorah, it's kosher shechita. My tamai d'Rabbanan de patri. Why would the Rabbanan hold that if a Ganav hired somebody else to shech, he would be potter from paying Dala B'Hei? And says the Gemara, you're right. If he slaughtered it on Shabbos, even Rabbanan would agree to a meyachayev to pay. Ki kapat Rabbanan ashara. When the Rabbanan pater is only if you shech for avodah zara, or if you shech the shar haniskal, which we're going to describe in a moment. But if those two, and even after you slaughter it, everybody agrees it's asur b'hanoah, and it's because it's asur b'hanoah. So therefore, it's not a kosher shechita, and that's why your potter, the Rabbanan said your potter from Dala to Hay. Now the Gemara asks a side question. A guy shech teveach la'avodah zara. A guy shechs for avodah zara. Now the question is, kaven the shochet bei purta. Why? Let me ask you a question. Why would somebody who shechs va'avodah zara, according to Rabbi Meir, Rabbi Meir said Yechayev Dalad V'Hei. If you shech v'avodah zara, the Ganav is Chayev Dalad V'Hei. Why? Kaven the shacha bei purta. As soon as the slaughterer slaughtered it a drop, so he had in mind that it's going for avodah zara. Itzalei, the whole animal becomes asur, becomes like an avodah zara animal. Idach, so when you continue the shechita, ki katavach, when you continue the slaughtering, lav demari katavach, it no longer belongs to the original owner, and therefore it doesn't even belong to anybody. It doesn't even belong to the Ganav. It's like, becomes separate, like it's an avodah zara, and therefore you should not be chayev daled v'hei. Because what's a normal case of daled v'hei? You steal an animal, and then you slaughtered it. So it's a kosher shechita, and you slaughtered an animal that really you had to return. You were obligated to return it because you stole it. There, the Torah said you pay daled v'hei. But here, once you made a slight nick in the animal, it's already an avodah zara animal. So it's already doesn't even belong to its original owner. and therefore, when you completed the shechita, and that's the time you should be mechayev daled behei, you weren't slaughtering an animal belonging to a nigzal, belonging to a victim who got stolen from. So why do you have to pay daled behei? Rabbi answered, our mission is that Bryce is talking about that when does he want it to become ostracized as a avodah zarah is only when he finishes the slaughtering. So it's not when he made the first nick. He's having in mind that when does it become a service to a avodah zarah? Only when he finished the shechita. And when he finished the shechita, and there was a shechita that actually belonged to, with the animal belonging to somebody else, therefore he's chayav daled behei according to Rabbi Meir. Now the Gemara asks a question. Shar haniskal, one of the things that you slaughtered, Rabbi Meir said that you chayav daled behei. Why? If you shechted a shar haniskal, what's a shar haniskal? An ox that killed somebody, and Bezdin said that you're supposed to stone the ox. It killed a human being, you have to stone the ox. Once the Bezdin said that this ox is on death row, you're not allowed to have hana'ah from that. You have to kill the ox, stone it, and then just bury it. Nobody can benefit from it. So therefore, why would the guy have to pay daled behei? If it's a shor haniskal, lavdi dehu, you're not shechting anything but that belonged to an original owner from the person that you stole it from. So why is the ganaf chayev daled behei? The animal is a shor haniskal, doesn't even belong to the ganaf. Answers the Gemara, Rabba says, here we're talking about, he gave it over to a watchman. So a guy gave a ox over to a watchman. And while it was in the watchman's possession, the ox did damage. And while it was in the house of the shomer, the Bezdin Paskin, we have to kill this ox. And the crook stole it from the house of the watchman. Okay, so what? So where are we getting here? Rameir sover like Rabbi Yaakov, sover like Rabbi Shimon. Rameir will hold like Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Shimon. What do you mean? Sover like Rabbi Yaakov, hold like Rabbi Yaakov. The Oma Apin Shimnik Badina Exir Shem Vaval Muchsa. He holds like Rabbi Yaakov that said that the shomer, he could go ahead, even though the animal is worthless because it's supposed to be killed, it's on death row, the shomer could go back to the guy who deposited the animal and says, listen, I'm a shomer, I'm giving you back your animal, even though I took responsibility if it gets stolen or lost and you paid me, but still I'm giving you back your animal. And therefore, I'm exempt from paying you, even though Bezdin's now going to take the animal and stone it, I'm exempt from paying you. So therefore, it's worth something to the shomer, okay? It's worth something to the shomer because if the shomer doesn't return any animal, the shomer is going to have to pay for an animal. Now, while the animal is still alive, as long as Bezdin didn't stone it yet, he can actually return it to its original owner and not have to pay. And he holds also like Reb Shimon. If something it can cause a person money, that means it itself is valueless, but it's worth something to somebody, it's like money. And therefore, when the Ganav stole it from the house of the Shomer, he's actually stealing something of value that the shomer has, because the shomer technically could return the shar niskel back to its original owner. So once the Ganav stole something from the shomer and then slaughtered it, so it's really dava hagar l'mamen k'mamen dami, and therefore he'd be chayav daled v'hei. That's the way Rav Shimon. That's what Rav Meir will hold, that if you steal the shar haniskel, you would have to pay daled and hay. Now that's all predicate. So that's one teretz. Now we're going to give one more teretz on this question. The question was, why would Rav Meir hold in the case that somebody slaughters on Shabbos, you have to pay daled v'hei, and if the Ganav is slaughtering it himself, he's going to get the death penalty. He should not have to pay. So the first teretz was that the Meiser was talking about that the Ganav himself didn't slaughter it. He hired somebody to slaughter the animal. That was the first teretz. Rabba says, L'oilam, you could even say b'toiveach al yedei atzmoi. Rab Meir, that the Bryce is talking about the Ganav himself slaughtered it. So if the Ganav himself slaughtered it, But don't we have a rule that if you get the death penalty, you're potter from paying any monetary fines, any monetary obligations? So the Gemara says, the Gemara even says, we go to Amid Beis, Lamadal and Amid Beis. Rameir holds that if you get the Malchus, you pay. But if you get the death penalty, you don't pay. You don't have any monetary obligations once you get the death penalty. So why in the case when if a person stole an animal and slaughtered it on Shabbos, would Rameir hold that you have to pay the dollar to hay? Shani Hani, because the Chiddush Shechitcha Torah Beknas, Afagav the Miktel Mishalem, because it's a fine. It's a fine with no reason. Why should you pay 4 or 5 times the amount of money the value that you stole? It's a fine, and therefore, according to Rameir, you would have to pay the 4 and 5. It's not like a monetary that you owe something. It's a fine put on the Torah. The Torah put a fine on somebody who slaughters an animal that he stole. And therefore, in this case, is the exception to the rule. And although he's going to get the death penalty for slaughtering an animal on Shabbos, he's going to have to pay the 4 and the 5. So you're going to jump over me and say, okay, then when later on, if our Mishnayos go according to Rameir, and Rameir normally holds that you don't pay when you get the death penalty, but you pay knas when you get the death penalty. So why is it when someone sleeps with his daughter in the next Mishnah, he's not going to pay the knas? He's not going to pay the knas. He's just going to get the death penalty. That's the Gemara's question later on. We're not going to get to it today. Anyway, how do you know that even though you get the death penalty, you have to pay fines? Obligated fines, not that the Torah put on you. What was the Rabba l'tamei? Rabba is aligned with his reasoning. The Amar Rabba said, if your goat was stolen, a guy had a goat that he stole on the weekday, let's say, and then he slaughtered it on Shabbos. He's chayav to pay the dollar v'hei, like Rameir. Why? He already stole the animal during the weekday. Before Shabbos came, he had the animal in his possession, and therefore, even though you slaughtered it on Shabbos, so what did Shabbos do? You slaughtered it and added, instead of paying the principal, because the principal already, you had an obligation to pay back the principal when you stole it on the weekday. So Shabbos, when slaughtering it on Shabbos, now the Torah now imposes upon you a triple fine. You have to pay 3 times more, or 4 times more. And therefore, that you have to pay, even if you slaughtered it on Shabbos. But, says Rabbah, Ganav utovach b'Shabbos, if you stole something and slaughtered it on Shabbos, so you did the action of stealing and slaughtering on Shabbos, you're potter. Why? Because since you're slaughtering it on Shabbos, you're getting the death penalty. By getting the death penalty, all monetary obligations are gone. You didn't have to pay back the animal that you stole, the original part of the animal. So if you're not going to have to pay back the original part of the animal, you don't have to pay back the dollar v'hei, because the only time there's like 3 or 4 times it added to your obligation is only if you're paying the original principal back. Then they add that to the tab, an extra fine that the Torah imposed. But since you stole it on Shabbos and slaughtering it on Shabbos, so when you slaughtered it, you now became exempt from paying any monetary obligations that are sensical obligations, such as returning the 100% principal that you stole. So since you're not obligated to pay the principal, you don't have to pay the dollar and the hay. If you don't have to pay the principal, you don't have to pay the dollar hay by slaughtering or selling it. That was Rabba's explanation. And then Rabba said another thing. Rabba said, let's say, the Torah, you have to learn Chumash to remember these things. The Torah says that if a man digs a tunnel under somebody's house to break into somebody's house, if the guy who owns the house sees the guy breaking into his house or sees him in this tunnel, he could take a gun and shoot him, and he's potter from killing anybody, because you could assume that if somebody's digging into your house, if somebody's digging into your house, he says that if you're not going to be a willing victim, he's going to kill you. So we have a klal. If somebody's coming to kill you, you could kill them first. So now, except if it's your son, then if it's a father breaking into his son's house, then the son should know that his father's not going to kill him. That's what the Torah says. Anyway, here it's a weekday. A gi was stolen, and he went back to the tunnel. Right, he stole a goat, and then he went through the tunnel, went into the tunnel, right under somebody's house. And once you're in that tunnel, it's like a zone where you're automatically on death row. The guy who owns the house sees that tunnel, into his house, sees you slaughtering an animal there. He actually has the right to kill you. So, but he stole the animal first. So he stole it one day, and then he took the animal back to the tunnel. Chayev. Then you chayev to pay dollar to heish. You already had the obligation to pay the 100%, the principal, and then you didn't have before you had the death penalty basically on you by being in that tunnel. So therefore, you're going to have to pay dollar v'hei. But gona b'tovach b'machtar. Let's say he broke into the house, stole an animal, and while he's running out in the tunnel, he slaughters the animal. Well, it's happening at the same time. Remember, the tunnel becomes like a Shabbos thing. It becomes like he's like obligated to die. He's a dead man in that tunnel. Potter. Then when he makes it out of the tunnel, he doesn't have to pay anything. Shin ein geneva, because since he doesn't have to pay the geneva, Potter ein tvicha ve'ein mechira. He doesn't have to pay. He doesn't have to pay the tvicha or the mechira. He doesn't have to pay tvicha mechira because he doesn't have to pay the principal, and therefore he doesn't have to pay the daled v'hei. So Rabbah gave you two cases of where a person would be obligated to be chayiv daled v'hei, and when sometimes he can do something and chayiv misa basically, and is potter from daled v'hei. So one is by the case of the Shabbos, and one is the case by the tunnel. And this is where we'll end. Utzricha, Rabbah had to tell you two cases. If we just say Shabbos, that Shabbos, mishum de isure iser olam, because it's an iser olam, as long as that forever they can kill you, right? Therefore, in that situation, I would say that if someone violated the Shabbos and slaughtered the animal, only there exempts you from the principle, because Shabbos is an iser that, in weeks' time, once you machal Shabbos, you already can be brought to court, a year later and given the death penalty. And therefore, in that case, that isser would exempt you from paying the principal. If you violated Shabbos, that exempts you from paying the principal. Aval b'machteres, being inside a tunnel, the isser shahu, it's only when you're in the tunnel you're considered a dead man. If you make it out of the tunnel, you're not a dead man. I might think that type of, being a dead man while you're in the tunnel wouldn't exempt you from the principle. If you did something by slaughtering the animal, it wouldn't exempt you from the principle. So that's why he had to teach you the din that it also applies by machteres. If he teaches you the din by the tunnel, and that the tunnel you have to pay back you lose the principal. You don't have to pay back the principal because you're a dead man in the tunnel. Because by being in the tunnel, automatically that's your warning. In other words, where's a situation you can kill somebody without warning him that you're going to kill him? If he's found in that tunnel. If he's found in a tunnel, a man could kill him without warning. You don't even have to say, I have a gun. As soon as you see him in the tunnel, you could shoot. So therefore, he's really a dead man in that tunnel. So if he's a dead man in that tunnel, all financial obligations are washed away. Therefore, he's not obligated to pay the principal that he stole if he stole it while he was in that tunnel. Aval Shabbos, but Shabbos, the boy Asra, Shabbos is you're not considered such a dead man when you violate the Shabbos, because in order to be a dead man on Shabbos, you have to have two witnesses warning him that if you violate the Shabbos, you're going to be a dead man. So he's not really a dead man if you violate the Shabbos. So I may think Shabbos would not be enough. If someone violates the Shabbos, it would not be enough for him to be exempt from the principle. tzricha, that's why I need both cases of Rabbah that teaches you that if only when you stole the animal prior to the event of being a dead man, if you stole the animal during the weekdays, or if you stole the animals but prior to entering the tunnel, then you chayav daled behei if you shechted on Shabbos or you shechted in the tunnel. But if you stole the animal while in the tunnel, that's how you stole the animal. Let's say the animal was in the tunnel, and you stole the animal while you're in that tunnel. Or let's say you stole the animal on Shabbos, so then it's at the same time. So both cases, you're exempt from the principle. And because you're exempt from the principle, you're potter from paying daled behei. Okay, so we'll stop over here, and we'll continue with this discussion tomorrow. You see how this Kesubos goes from Hilchas Shabbos to Baba Metzia to Baba Kama. That's why it's called like a little Shas, because now we're discussing Baba Kama here.